Good afternoon, Hazak members, supporters, and viewers. Today, I'd like to talk about redistricting and how it affects you. We're in the year 2022, and this is the year when the results of the 2020 census are being applied to how we are represented politically. It means that in some neighborhoods, population grows, in other places it shrinks, demographics change, ethnic groups move around, and so the districts that decide who represents us in the city council, state assembly, state senate, and Congress reflects these changes. During this change of districts, lines move by a few blocks, and you might end up with a new representative to speak on your behalf. Do you know this person? Have you voted for this person? Do you plan to vote on this person? Why should you even vote? Here at Hazak, we believe that an active citizenry means a stronger community and, of course, as the slogan says, a better future. So when you see elected officials cutting the ribbon at a Hazak event, recognize that they are there not just because it is good for them to represent all of their constituents, but also because we are a constituency that speaks out, that votes, that are active participants in public affairs. So let's talk about this. When we talk about the maps of our community, perhaps the map we are most familiar with are the eruvim, the maps that define where we can carry on Shabbat, where we can carry from one home to another, one from our synagogues to our homes to our schools. The most famous eruvim, of course, are the Regal Park Forest Hills eruv and the larger Central Queens eruv. But these eruvim do not define our community as far as the government is concerned. It is purely a private boundary with permission, of course, of the local authorities. But here are some maps you might not be familiar with that you should know more about. Here's a map of the 6th Congressional District as it stands until this week, when it'll be slightly changed. This is the district represented by Congresswoman Grace Meng, as it has been since 2012. But look closely at it. You see different colors representing different racial ethnic groups: white, Hispanic, Asian, Black, most prominently represented here. We are not the majority here. The Jewish community is visible, it is prominent, but it is not the majority here. But in a tight election, the Jewish vote can make a difference for the winning candidate. Another thing that makes a difference is building a coalition, finding issues of common concern with other ethnic and racial groups that can result in a candidate's victory in an election based on issues where we agree with other groups. But what if the line was moved in such a way where our voice is not the key difference, where our voice is such a small minority, it might not matter, where our voice is divided between different districts? When we think of elections, so many of us vote in presidential elections, but in a state like New York, the Democratic Party enjoys an overwhelming majority. So unless you live in a place like Florida, yes, it's nice to vote for president, you're part of the larger popular vote, but you should really think about state and federal elected offices, because that is where your money goes. That is where elected officials decide on what should be done with your tax money and how it should be allocated when it comes to services. Think also about issues of criminal justice. For example, in 2020, the very close vote for the Queens district attorney between Democratic Socialist Tiffany Caban and Melinda Katz, who's more of a mainstream Democrat, that voice was very close, decided by less than 100 votes. So for those of you who voted, you are part of the difference. And if you don't vote, someone else does. And that person still gets elected, whether you vote or not. So by voting, you're making a difference for a candidate who represents your views, your values, and the values of your community. So let's look at the lines for city council as they stand until this year. The council members who are most visible on the Jewish scene are Jim Gennaro and Lynn Schulman, because Jim Gennaro represents Fresh Meadows, Kew Garden Hills, Briarwood, Jamaica Estates. Lynn Schulman represents Regal Park, Forest Hills, Kew Gardens, and portions of Richmond Hill. But when the lines change, they might not be your council members anymore. Or if they still are your council members, they might be facing primary opponents from candidates who might not share your values. So it's very important to pay attention to where you live inside these lines. This is, again, the city council, who decides your property taxes and city services. Now let's look at the congressional lines. When it comes to foreign policy, the relationship between the United States and Israel, the funding that Israel receives, the funding that our nonprofit institutions receive for their security. A lot of that is decided by our Congress. The congressman representing the largest Jewish constituency in Queens is Grace Meng, an able and capable and experienced voice. But again, when the lines change, we want to make sure that we have her back as she's had our back. Not an endorsement, just a reminder of her experience and her record as our community is concerned. Look at these crazy squiggly lines. This is the state Senate, the upper legislative chamber on the state level. The three state senators who have the largest Jewish constituencies in Queens are Joe Adabo Jr., Toby Ann Stavisky, and Leroy Comrie. Experienced, knowledgeable voices as far as our community is concerned, but you should still know where you live, because when a neighborhood is gerrymandered, meaning divided in a very unnatural manner, our voice is diminished. Looking here at Kew Garden Hills and Fresh Meadows. So again, it's nice that they represent us at this time, but when the lines change, we need to know who's representing us, who's running against them. If they retire or leave office, who would be running in their place? And how would they reflect our views and our well-being on the state level? Likewise for the state assembly, we talk about Dan Rosenthal lives in Kew Garden Hills, and we talk about Nili Rosick who lives in Fresh Meadows to the east of Dan Rosenthal. But when the lines change, who is representing you? Is it Rosenthal or is it Rosick? How well do you know their voting records? This is why it's important to pay attention, not just when they cut the ribbons and visit our schools and synagogues, but when you visit them. Because when you have a question about a state agency or a city agency, whether it is a permit, a violation, budgeting allocations, and security for our community, you need to have their numbers, their emails, so you can have contact with them, because they amplify our voices. You can contact a public agency, but when you do it through an elected official, your voice becomes much stronger. So again, just a reminder, whether you see Mayor Eric Adams at a Chazak event wearing the Joma, whether you see Governor Kathy Hochul speaking at a Chazak legislative dinner, or Senator Schumer, or State Attorney General Letitia James, they are there because they know that our community has a voice, and we use our voice. So our voice is used not just when we vote, not just when we attend a demonstration or sign a petition or sign the census to add to our numbers, but in every opportunity. So when you hear from Chazak that your voice is needed for a petition, for a virtual public hearing to submit a comment, whether it is in regards to education policy, security policy, or redistricting or any other matter, please be involved. Pay attention, because that's what makes our community strong, and that's what makes our future strong. Thank you so much.